Today on Finding Freedom, we're digging into institutional power, media narratives, and why some of the most controversial stories deserve a second look. Hey, welcome back to Finding Freedom here on the Lions of Liberty Network. Great to have you with me. If you're listening to this when it comes out live, Happy New Year. If you're listening later than that, then still Happy New Year, but I'm sure you've heard that from many people before me saying this now. But either way, great to have you with me. Looking forward to 2026 and everything that I hope it will bring. 2025 was a interesting year. It was a year for me personally of a lot of learning, which I'll expand on that in a future episode. But today, we're here to talk about some important stories, bringing on a new guest who hasn't been on the show before. So excited to get some insights from him. Introduce him in just a moment. Before I do that, I want to talk about Fox and Sons coffee. It's my favorite coffee. It's what I start every single morning with. And I'm especially excited. One of my Christmas gifts is a coffee mug warmer. So I'll be able to have my coffee mug right here. Recording this in the afternoon, so not drinking coffee now. But when I record in the morning, I'll have my coffee mug right here, nice and warm with delicious Fox and Sons coffee. You can get 15% off an order of $40 or more by using promo code JOHN, that's JOHN, at checkout, and that's foxandsons.com, FOXNSONS.com. Check it out. Okay, let's bring in my guest for today. It is Brian O'Leary. Brian is the voice behind the O'Leary Review. It's also the pen or the keyboard behind the O'Leary Review, where he writes and podcasts at the nexus of politics, history, sports, and culture. He's a populist conservative, a traditionalist who is not interested in the safe, sanitized version of the news, whether he's dissecting the state of our republic or the state of the NFL. Brian delivers unvarnished truth, unrelenting insight that you won't find in the legacy media. Brian, great to have you here on Finding Freedom.
Thanks, John. Good introduction. Appreciate it. And it's true, I guess. So
that's good. Yeah. That's good. That's good that it's true. If it was a bunch of lies, that would be a problem.
Yeah. We've got so the O'Leary Review is right now on Substack, and that's where my major platform is. So we do podcasts and regular columns over there. And, we have a podcast feed too outside of the Substack. It's the same thing. So
anyway. Yeah. And we'll link to all that on the show notes page as well. I think I came across your work, Brian. I think it was about a month ago. Was that maybe a little longer?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Like 3 weeks ago, probably.
3 weeks ago, where you had written on your Substack about the Jerry Sandusky scandal. Giving a take that goes against the populist narrative. As I've done as well here on this show.
I would say against popular narrative, not the populist narrative, John.
Yeah, it's probably. I guess that's accurate. Yeah. The popularly accepted narrative, and
yes.
Put it that way. But I do want to talk about that. But I think we have a lot to talk about. We had a good conversation a few weeks back before the holidays, and I think we have a lot in common. So we'll get to Jerry Sandusky. But before we do, let's kind of set things up so my audience gets to know you a little bit better. You can intro yourself, maybe a little more extensively than I did in my intro, and kind of share the reason. Why you decided to start, writing and the motivation behind the O'Leary Review.
Yeah, you bet. Essentially, I've been writing most of my life, wanted to get into journalism right after college. And it's like, geez, there's no real great jobs, and that was what 25 years ago, I guess. I don't know.
Jeez. Yeah.
Yeah.
Me,
So
me too.
anyway,
It's a long time.
yeah, and I didn't necessarily pursue that. I tried a little bit, and then just it didn't. And then when the advent of blogs and citizen journalism came along, I threw my hat in the ring a little bit there. Um, and really, I wanted to be a sports writer. I just wanted to go to the games and report
Mhm.
on sports, and that sports have been my life. And so I I think I started. I don't remember what year it was, but Bleacher Report had just started. Citizen journalism. I saw these crummy articles, and uh, I was like, "Oh, I'll be one of those people." And so, one of my first articles, I believe, it was somewhat tied to sports. And I'm from Portland, Oregon. That's where I was living at the time, and they had a deal where this Major League Soccer was coming to town. We have this
Mhm.
Portland Timbers have been kind of a franchise since, I don't know, 1975 or something. And then professional soccer died out in the US, came back. They were an indoor team for a while. Then they were an amateur team. Then they came into the lower level professional soccer before MLS was really a thing. And MLS only had a few teams. But then they wanted an MLS team. And we had this stadium, still do, frankly, in Portland, and where the minor league Portland Beavers have played since the 1950s. There was a couple years there in the 70s where the Beavers didn't exist. And if you ever watched the film The Battered Bastards of Baseball on Netflix,
No, I haven't
about
watched
the
that.
Portland Mavericks, they were a single A team, and they had a ragtag crew of guys, and I know several of them. And they were a generation older than me, but I know several of those guys that played on that team, and so that was a big thing in Portland. But then we got that became too successful. It was Kurt Russell's father owned the team, and Kurt Russell actually played on that ball club, and he was a star baseball player until he got hurt, and then he became who he is now. But that was huge in Portland. And then we got the Beavers back, and the Beavers were actually the Pittsburgh Pirates farm club when I was, first growing up. And so I knew a lot of these Pirates guys.
Isn't that crazy? All the way across the country, you would have one
Yeah,
of your
and
minor league
then
affiliates.
yeah, and
Insane.
then the Pirates dropped them, or we dropped the Pirates, or whatever,
Mhm.
and then we were the Phillies. And that was the year that when the Phillies were great, when they went to the World Series, played the Orioles.
93, maybe?
83, 83,
93? 83.
83.
Okay.
So we had the Phillies, and then the Portland club was great. I think they won or finished second in the AAA World Series, and it was just like, all right. Anyway, so this is a big thing, and Portland's actually a pretty big baseball town, also a big basketball town. We just never had a big league club, and you fast forward a few more years, we had the Twins. When the Twins were winning World Series, they were our team,
Hmm.
and but not a lot of people went to these games just because the stadium was. It wasn't really designed originally as a baseball stadium, but it was like one of these things where everybody, you went to the if you wanted to watch good ball, you went there. And anyway, they left and they moved to Salt Lake, and then the Rockies moved in when they first started up in the early 90s, and they had a single A team there for a few years. And then, all right, well, baseball is popular in Portland. Okay. So then the Padres took over the AAA. Anyway,
Mhm.
so here we are, mid early 2000s, and uh, soccer starts becoming a big thing. It's always been kind of relatively big in Portland, but came this thing, and they wanted to renovate the stadium so they could get a Major League Soccer. And it's like, man, really? Uh, so that was my like, what? And they were gonna move the baseball team, build a new stadium, and so anyway. Long story short, is my article really picked apart the mathematics behind
Mhm.
all this spending, and ultimately, what happened was that they kicked baseball out. Baseball team moved to El Paso or somewhere, Albuquerque or somewhere like that. And we were left without a club. And there'd been a couple or one single A club with the Diamondbacks has popped up in the suburbs. But then they rebuilt the stadium, and I was a high school baseball coach. We would play games at the stadium. That was great for the kids and all that stuff.
Mhm.
Anyway, my article from a few years prior was picking apart that whole thing. And I was like, so I'm not really a sports columnist, but I have something to do with sports. And I just and then fast forward to say 2020, where it's the COVID situation. And I'd always wanted to do a podcast, and I was probably listening to you, John, frankly, or at that time. And I was like, I just want to do a sports podcast or be on the radio talking sports, and there's just no opportunity. So like, this is like 10 years, 5 years of whatever of me thinking about this. And I called up my buddy and I said, all right, let's do a sports podcast. He's like, what? There's no sports going on. I'm like, well, we can figure it out. We can talk sports. And so we had a weekly show called Sportlanders, the podcast. We essentially focused on Portland, the Trailblazers, and Oregon Ducks football and stuff like that. And it was a good show. But what happened, and I was talking to you about this a while ago, is that my faith in the institution of sports, I thought it was just going to rebound, and it just never did. And so I continued on this, doing a weekly show. My buddy's like, I just don't have time to do this. I don't know where this is going. And fair enough. And it's fine. He was actually better at the podcasting part than I am. But anyway, I continued on. And then some point in 2021, I just like, I can't do this anymore. There's sports is every single league, conference, whatever, they bought into this whole COVID thing, hook, line, and sinker.
And that was when the NFL was putting end racism in the end zones, I think also.
It's like, you can't go to the games, college football with nobody in the stands, and they're, worried about masks. And meanwhile, these guys are sweaty and spitting on each other and grabbing each other. It's like, nobody got sick.
I just saw, I don't remember this when it actually happened, but I just saw a clip on Instagram or Facebook recently. It was like, I think it was a game at Fenway Park that was an empty game, nobody there. And a fan broke into the stadium and was sitting, maybe it wasn't Fenway, because I don't think he was up at the Green Monster, but anywhere, somewhere in the outfield at a game.
Well, they had a game in
COVID
Baltimore a few years prior where they closed down the whole stadium and they played a game in an empty stadium because of some violence in Baltimore a few years before that.
Yeah, well, it wasn't that. It wasn't Baltimore, but anyway, they stopped the game until they got this guy.
Oh, this
out
is
of the
in
stadium.
COVID, huh?
Yeah, it was during COVID. Crazy. Like in hindsight, looking back on that now,
so
you and I are like, that was insane. But it's wild to think there's still people who were like, well, I'm glad they did that. That was the right thing to do.
Yeah, and so that bothered me.
Scary part.
That bothered me to no end. And so I'm like, I can't continue to do this sports podcast. I just can't. I'm done. And then I was working with a family member of mine. He fired me because I wouldn't tell him whether I got the vaccine or not. And that created a whole host of problems with the organization. And so I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to start writing to my email list that I got set up with. I didn't even realize I had people that signed up for my email list. I went and found there were 6 people. And I just like, I'm going to start writing every day and, or most days. And I did. And fast forward, I don't know, I guess it was probably mid 2022. And I got in this, maybe we talk about it later, but Tom Woods' School of Life. And I was like, I've been listening to Tom for 20 years and know his whole program. So the idea was that Tom's people teach you how to do life. And it's like, okay, I'll sign up. And it was great. They have webinars every other Tuesday and bring somebody in and talk about different strategies. How to go. It was great. Fine. And then he set up these accountability groups where people come
Mhm.
in, like, it's like group coaching essentially. And I'm like, I'm sitting here and like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, I got all these ideas, but really what I want to do is, I just want to continue writing. Oh, you're an influencer. I'm like, no, I'm not I'm not an influencer. I want to get my ideas out. And
Everybody's an influencer
yeah,
in
right.
20 in
Yeah. And so
2026, yeah.
I just say the more you, hear my ideas, the more you'll agree with them. So I just wanted, help with developing that platform. Say, well, you got a podcast, you got the setup, you got the microphone, you got it all. I'm like, I'm a sports podcaster. I do not want to talk about sports every week, or let alone every day. I just can't,
Mhm.
I just don't have the bandwidth. Well, what's the podcast going to be about? I said, I don't know. So I just read an email that I wrote and, commented on my podcast, and that became, went from Sportlanders podcast to the Brian D. O'Leary show. There's a lot of Brian O'Learys out there, so I had my middle initial, not like Michael J. Fox or anything like that. But
Yeah.
uh, anyway, so and it just continued, and then I started interviewing people within the school. Like, I get my interview chops up, and like, all right, where's this going? I was like, I don't really know, so I just kept doing it.
Mhm.
And turns out, like, you've been in podcasting. It got away from me. I was just spending way too much time. I didn't have the time and to really do it properly. But it was a good run. I'm still I still do it on occasion now, trying to get interviews with thought leaders and people who write books and stuff. And it turns out that it's been mostly sports again. So it's like gone from cultural commentary, but in really through the lens of sports is really kind of how I've transitioned,
Hmm.
certainly since the fall, because I went to my 30th high school reunion a few months back. And one of my buddies, he's a completely different politically thinker than I am. And he's like, I like your stuff. I'm like, really? He's like, I didn't even know you're on my list. So, yeah, I read all the stuff. And he's like, I like it. I was like, really? Wow. He's like, oh, but just the sports stuff. I'm like, okay, well, it makes sense because talking with my wife and, I have some, if you've read any of my stuff, I have some pretty pointed commentary on the culture and the way it's going. And I spent bulk of the summer just developing, my daily emails into really columns that you can read, like newspaper style columns. And my wife was afraid that, you can't speak too loudly, you get shot in the neck. And so I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to pivot a little bit and I'm going to dive more into sports. And, we going back to this Sandusky thing. I think I first heard about this whole uh, case, really. I didn't know much about it other than, in
Let's
2011.
let's take a
Yeah.
quick pause here. I
Yeah.
wanna
Yeah.
I wanna take us back a minute before we go into Jerry Sandusky, because once
Yeah.
we go into that,
Yeah.
that could be the rest of the show.
Okay. Fair enough.
And but maybe not. Who knows? I'd like to get to that. I'd like to talk about, some more of the stuff you're doing in the school of life
Okay.
with Tom Woods. But before we get to that, I think it's really interesting that you describe yourself as where is it? I just lost it. A populist conservative and traditionalist. And I think that's
Yeah.
interesting because I
Yeah.
think there's people out there who are at odds with each other, who someone would consider themselves a populist, maybe like
Yeah.
Donald Trump, a populist, a conservative, like a traditional conservative, could be at odds with Donald Trump. A traditionalist could be at odds with a conservative and a populist. So I'm just
Yeah.
curious to see how you kind of wrap those three together.
Well, I think my main influences as far as that goes, probably Russell Kirk. And I so I want to say it was back in probably 2005 or something. I had a job and I was going to buy the business. Didn't work out for a number of reasons. So I said, I'm just going to take some time out and figure out what I believe. Here's what I believe. And so I said, all right, I'm buying. Back in the days of newspapers, I got 3 newspapers every day,
Mhm.
read them all. And I got a subscriptions to, I don't know, 4 or 5 magazines, a couple on the left, a couple on the right. And I'm like, I just poured through them, and then I bought the books and read the books. And I was like, okay, here's what I believe. And it was largely influenced, like the idea of what a conservative is really coalesced by reading a lot of Russell Kirk. And it is really different than what the conservative movement is today.
Mhm.
And, thinkers that were influenced by, I would say probably a lot by Kirk, would be like Pat Buchanan for one. And I've been a
Yeah,
fan of Pat Buchanan for a long time.
me
And of
too.
course, in certain circles, that renders you crazy and whatever. Paul Gottfried is another guy that really these guys were removed from the conservative movement in the 80s and 90s. Joe
Mhm.
Sobran, Sam Francis, all these guys, they have important things to say. And they're branded, they're called all sorts of names. And in this day and age, or certainly in the 90s, it was like you're a pariah if you believe the thing. And but uh so anyway, point is that Buchanan, populist conservative, and uh, I think Trump took a lot of those ideas. They were at loggerheads. They ran against each other in the Reform Party candidate, or uh,
Mhm.
remember in the year 2000. And Trump, you know, took took on Buchanan. Buchanan emerged as the candidate, but they reconciled somewhat. And the ideas, I think, Pat's since retired, but he's one of his last columns, or toward the end of his writing career, he said, the ideas made it, but Buchanan didn't. And that's a lot of Trump's populist platform. Trump is now conservative.
Oh,
He
no.
is a Republican. He is nominally to the right, but really, if you go back and look at him, he would be a 1980s Democrat, really. And that's really
Mhm.
where he is. And so that I guess, Overton window or whatever shifted quite a bit in the culture. So anyway, I'm not part of the conservative movement. A lot of those people bother me to no end. And right now there's like a war in the right of all these people who are trying to get their point of view out. And I kind of stand athwart of all of that and just have my own ideas. I don't get involved with these ideas of the modern conservative movement because I just really am not one of those. So Russell Kirk, getting back to Kirk, he would claim probably that all these people who claim they're conservatives are conservatives because they say that. Well, they don't necessarily they're not really following his prescription of what conservatism is in the English and American tradition.
Mhm. Okay, well,
That's
that is
where
interesting. That does make a lot more sense, the Pat
yeah.
Buchanan angle. I
Yeah.
didn't think of that when I read that, but
Yeah, and so I know you're largely libertarian leaning, and I
mhm,
am, like, I would say I'm a fellow traveler in many of those circles, but a lot of it doesn't resonate with me. Certainly, in the uh, last cycle,
I
the
agree.
the idea of a libertarian party is just bizarre to me.
I agree.
People that they've run, I have friends. Matter of fact, another podcast I do called the Natural Order Podcast. My friend Adam Heyman, he was on the executive committee of some sort in the Libertarian Party, and they broomed him because he didn't fall in lockstep with their crazy whoever the guy they nominated for
Oh, yeah, the
the
crazy leftist, yeah,
oh yeah. And so it
HJ
has
Oliver.
nothing to do with so I'm a fellow traveler in a lot of those circles, and the economic angle, the Austrian economics, I'm largely sympathetic to. But again, that also doesn't jibe with a lot of the nationalist. I wouldn't even call it national economic nationalism. That has a bad ring to it when you call yourself a nationalist these days. But
Mhm.
I think America for Americans is what I'm for, just like Oregonians for Oregon. And
Well, it's like America First, which now has a bad ring to it, or people are
of
trying to give
course
it a
it does.
bad ring because it's
Yeah,
Nick Fuentes.
yeah.
That's his
And
calling card.
and
But
I was
there's
like,
nothing wrong with wanting America, putting America first.
no, and I don't really know much about Fuentes. I think that the media coverage of this guy and I don't listen to him. I've seen
Mhm.
maybe a few clips of him, but man, they're squawking all about Nick Fuentes. I'm like, man, the media coverage is much it far outpaces his cultural influence. Most people don't care
He
about
does.
Nick Fuentes.
Yeah, most people our age don't care, but I think the younger generation, young men do.
Perhaps, and that's what I
He
get.
definitely has influence there, and he's definitely said some inflammatory things, some
Okay.
things, a lot of things that I disagree with. At the same time, though, I've watched a couple of his shows. The
Uh-huh.
guy is an incredible entertainer. Like
Okay.
doing a solo podcast. I mean, you've done a lot of podcasting. Doing a solo podcast is not easy. Doing a solo
Right.
podcast on camera, engaging with live comments, going back and forth, that's extremely difficult. He entertains, he keeps the show going. And when you're talking that much, you're
Mhm.
bound to say some things that are
Oh,
going to
sure.
get you in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
So, anyway, like, I don't align myself with that. I just stay away from all those, inter-right wars or whatever.
yeah,
Now it's like the Candace
okay.
Owens versus Ben Shapiro and all that. It's like, I don't really have time.
Don't get me started on Candace.
Yeah.
We don't have enough time for that.
No.
So yeah, well, Candace, this is a good transition because
Sure.
Candace has become the queen of the conspiracy theories,
Yeah.
and a lot of people out there would call people like yourself and me a conspiracy theorist for questioning the Jerry Sandusky narrative. And in
Right.
fact, if people and a lot of my listeners are familiar with John Ziegler's work, and it's really the opposite of a conspiracy theory. It's just looking at the facts and the reality of the case and complete lack of evidence around any
Right.
of the crimes Jerry Sandusky was accused of. But a starting point for this, for what I want to talk about with you, I
Mhm.
think the most interesting part is that you had no ties to Penn State, no interest in the case. That I think you said you just came across it, maybe
Z
listening. Well, obviously you're familiar with the media narrative, but you came across
Yeah.
the questioning of the media narrative. I think listening to one of my episodes with John Ziegler.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely it was. And then I'm like, "All right, well, how do I find out more about this?" And then I found out how to contact John. I got him on I've done 2 podcasts with him, just
Hmm.
trying to figure out more about the story. And, it's not it's a good I have a episode that is I combined, all the stuff we talked about on that case, so I don't need to necessarily rehash it all about
Hmm.
the ins and outs of it all. But Uh, I was just fascinated. I didn't care about Penn State. I applied to Penn State. For matter of fact, it was I think the only public university I got rejected from. The only reason I applied for it because I like their football uniforms. I think that'd be cool to go to football games at Penn State.
Hmm.
That's it. I don't think I would have gone, but it didn't matter. But I didn't have any allegiance to Penn State whatsoever. Frankly, I was looking at my notes, even as late as 2017. I didn't even think I wrote about it in this article, and I'm like, it was when Penn State was 6-0. I think it was 2007. James Franklin's, I don't know, can't remember what year, 3rd year maybe. And I'm like, they're 6-0. All the media is like, oh, this is such a great turnaround story. I'm like, this program needs to be shut down. They're just complicit in all this nonsense. And I didn't believe for a moment that Paterno. I thought he got a bad rap, but I was like, man, if this is going on at Penn State, this child abuse and all this stuff, there's no way. What are these fans doing
Hmm.
that uh, that are still fans of their football team? You
Which
know?
I think, let me just interject there,
Yeah.
which is a good reminder for people who are Penn State fans to remember that this is how a lot of the public still sees this.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of, and just internally, like people who don't understand the Penn State culture with regards to their view on this case, a lot of people early on, rightly so, assume there's no way Joe Paterno um, would allow any of this, would know about this and hide it. There's no way he would participate in a conspiracy. But they always just said, but Jerry Sandusky is obviously 100% guilty.
Right.
And what they didn't realize was it doesn't really work that way. You can't just have, okay, well, Penn State's great, Joe Paterno's great, Jerry Sandusky was guilty, all that stuff happened, and let's just sweep that away. Where if the allegations were true, which I don't think they are, then there would be some culpability there for sure, which would justify the outrage from fans. But
Right. Yeah, and so I think it was like in 2021 or something that I did that first interview pretty soon after I heard your show, and then I think I spent maybe the Christmas break of 21 or 22, I can't remember, going back whenever it was, and listening to with the benefit of hindsight, the entire
mhm,
podcast that John had done up until
yeah.
that point, and he's since added several more episodes that provide even more,
Oh, the
light
most
on this.
the most recent ones are probably
Oh,
some of the best ones. I mean, the whole
yeah.
thing's incredible, but yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and so I got him on a podcast, we talked about it, and I'm just like, like, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, "Why do you even wanna go down this road? You are just gonna get skewered." But at that point, I didn't really care because
Mhm,
I was just living my life, and I had already gotten fired, like I said, from a family member
mhm,
because of the whole COVID thing. It didn't make sense. So I'm like, I got to change what I'm doing, and I got to find out the truth of what the heck's going on, and not be afraid to say what I believe in this
mhm,
culture anymore, because people always want to hedge, it seems like to me, on everything in this culture. And like, I'm not hedging anymore. And so if I find holes in this narrative, I'm gonna push back. I don't find any holes in the narrative, or not. Well, I do find tons of holes in the media narrative, but not in the way John presents the case. And he's done a lot of work. Frankly, he for years he was convinced Jerry Sandusky was guilty,
mhm,
and his goal was like this Joe Paterno angle makes no sense. And it was like, all right. And he made a documentary film on it. And still he believed
yeah,
this allegations against Sandusky. Why wouldn't you? And you pick it apart, and then why did I write this long article on Substack at the beginning of December? Well, I just like, I've been thinking about this, I've been researching it. I have all the um and it started out, I was just going to do like a normal column, like a 1500, 2000 word column, and then I'm like, all right, well, man, you're not getting the point across here. It turned into like a, I don't even know, like 30,000, uh not 30, I don't know. It's a long column. You read it, but
yeah.
why?
The
Well,
the
Penn State was hiring a new football coach. There's six
mhm,
permanent or interim coach since Joe Paterno, or including Joe Paterno, and and I it's like, well, I need to write something about this. I need to get my, my all my thoughts out on what this means right now, because I'm going to wait another 5, 8, 10 years when they get a new coach or whatever, and still a lot of these things come out. But
because just to
yeah.
back you up there, because, as this coaching search is going on, it lasted over 50 days, which was a bit ridiculous, but that's not here or there.
Mhm.
You'll see on any Twitter, X posts talking about the coaching search, people from outside Penn State saying, "Oh, Penn State's disgusting.
Yeah.
They hid the crimes of pedophiles." Joe Paterno, of course, the Pitt fans, Joe knew. So still today, we're talking more than a decade later,
Mhm.
it's still going on.
Still
So yeah.
going on. And I wrote the article, put a brief thing on Twitter, and it blew up. It was like probably my most viral Twitter post that I've ever had, and I think maybe you saw it there,
Mhm.
um, and that was crazy. The there's obviously people that know what we know, and they back you up, and then but they're just combating all these other false narratives that are out there. And I guess my whole point in doing this was really not to defend Jerry Sandusky at all. Like, I think, whether he's innocent of the charges or not is almost irrelevant. It's how we got here.
Mhm.
It's how we got here. And I think what I believe happened is that the media, and thus the general public, had this narrative already already baked. And if you back off of that, and what Penn State did, they just started throwing money out to all these accusers. And if Penn State ever, and still to this day and in the future, if they ever admit that they were wrong on any part of this whole thing, they're admitting to a massive fraud, and they can't do that. They cannot do that. And ESPN,
not only Penn State, it's
no.
It's so there's so much corruption even outside of this within the political system in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And from, former governors to attorney generals to, the corruption runs so deep. And just peel back the layers of the onion on this case and the nefarious characters who pulled the levers that helped to lock Jerry Sandusky up, and all the way down to the prosecutors who were actually getting paid out of one of the trust funds of one of these accusers.
Yeah,
and it was a nothing burger in the media. That was revealed recently.
Yeah. So I guess what it comes down to is I just want to write things that are true, say things that are true, and let the chips fall where they may, because I'm like you and me, independent media, really, we're never going to have this influence that the newspapers or the networks or whatever have. But there are people that will understand the truth. And it's frankly not going to be the mass general part of the public. It's just not. I think the narrative is too far gone. But the people that do know about this case, all right, well, what else is going on in this culture that we just jump on these narratives? And you tie it back into COVID too. They jumped at this narrative that was this Black Death, and it's like, no, they don't even account. Well, we can litigate that again, but they didn't account for the age of the people that were dying, and the isolation, and the kids losing years of schooling, and it's affected my family, like that whole thing. It's like it just threw everything out of whack for something that wasn't true. And what else is going to come down the line that's not true, that people believe it's true because the media, once they craft their narrative, it's all over and people believe it. It's like, why wouldn't you? It's who you trust. So,
and I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword to a certain extent, because you were speaking earlier about how and I am libertarian leaning. Of course, I'm very suspect of our institutions in this country, the FBI, the CIA, our politicians. Go down the list. And I think that corruption has been there for decades. This isn't a new thing.
Yeah,
and I think it went away when Donald Trump was elected. I think there's still a lot of corruption in a lot of these institutions. But at the same time, and I want to get your thoughts on this because we're seeing things happen in real time in front of us here, because of the trust is now totally gone, which I don't think is a bad thing. But it's like this not Pandora's box. It's like a vacuum that's been busted open. That's all the contents are spilling out now, and you have professional conspiracy theorists like Candace Owens and people who are just driven to latch on to something, create an audience around it just for the sake of creating an audience. That's exactly what I think people like Candace Owens are doing. Ian Carroll doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Which it's tough. I think it's double-edged sword, because you have people like John Ziegler, who dedicates his life to uncovering the truth in this story, loses tons of money, ruins his career. I'm talking about the Jerry Sandusky story. And then I think maybe that's how you can tell, the motivations of the people. Who's getting rich off of their reporting? Not that making money is a bad thing. I am a capitalist, but I think we have to be very careful when we look at the influencers, the so-called new age journalists who pick up their own camera and start telling the story because this power vacuum that used to be there has now disappeared. So I want to get your kind of thoughts on that the shifting landscape of journalism. And right now, we're recording this on December 30th. The
Mhm.
biggest story is these Somali daycares in
Okay.
Minnesota and Ohio. So
Yeah.
and this will continue. There's always going to be new things.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't like a lot of the major institutions. They're just not trustworthy. The
Hmm.
media taken as a whole is not trustworthy. The political system taken as a whole is not trustworthy. There are good actors in all of that, all those systems, but they get washed. Their voice gets washed out. And I think with the advent of independent media in the last call it 10 or 15 years, you have the ability to get on a podcast. You have the ability to write a Substack. You have the ability to have an email list where you send
Hmm.
your thoughts to people, and largely those people, if you keep it up and know what you're talking about, you can be as incendiary as you want or not, or however it works. But you're going to have people that are on your side, and your network is a perfect example of this. It's like, well,
Hmm.
yeah, we all believe in the same thing, and we're getting somewhere. It's just not big enough right now. The institutions are uh, are so big, and we're so scattered. And I don't know that there's a real solution there.
Hmm.
Uh, but the fact that I can have a voice, you can have a voice, where we never had a voice prior to like a blog. And who's going to read a blog? Well, people read them, but it's like there's not a lot of influence nowadays. It's like, all right, well, you now have this independent media structure with all these people having these podcasts and everything. Well, then guess what happens, or what's happened really in the last 2 years? All these big corporate media giants have discovered, oh, podcasting's where it's at. The 3-hour afternoon drive time radio show, it's okay, but it's not really where the money is. So we're going to throw 10 producers and a bunch, millions of dollars at each one of these podcasts with these radio hosts or celebrities or whatever. And they're just going to fill up the content vacuum. It's like,
Hmm.
so it makes it even harder for guys like you and me
Yeah.
to do this the way we want to. And I think it's a testament to your success that you just keep doing it. And you mentioned to me that you've had some ups and downs, and I've had some ups and downs. And frankly, it's one of these things where I'm the one man show, man, where I you know produce all the podcasts and do all my writing and have to do all the social media. It's like I just want to write. I just want to talk.
Yeah.
And it's more than that. And so it's really hard to do on a regular basis, even if you are right, or even if people do want to hear you. It's just hard to do as this media landscape. They figured something out that we knew. But there are ways. There are ways. And you should buy some Fox and Sons coffee. That will help John out here.
Yeah, no, talking about ups and downs, it's funny. Last week was the first week since I started podcasting that I took off, that I didn't release an episode. And it was kind of like a pride thing. Like I wanted to be able to say, like, I've never had a week where I didn't put an episode out. Then I realized that doesn't get me anything. That doesn't matter. Like
Mhm.
I'm taking the week of Christmas off, and I talked to the rest of our our team here, the other podcasters, and they're like, yeah, why put a podcast out the week of Christmas? People are traveling, they're with their families. They should be with their families. They should be,
Mhm.
not listening to podcasts. So why compete with that? But it's so funny, like how my mindset has kind of shifted. Like, and I think it's important to, especially with podcasting in this landscape, and not that I plan on taking many more weeks off in the future, but things change, and we've established an audience, so we can afford to take a week off. But let's talk a little bit about Tom Woods and
Oh,
his
sure.
School of Life community, and how you kind of stumbled your way into taking on a leadership role within that
Yeah.
community.
Yeah. So Tom, probably most of your folks are familiar with them. I know you guys. I think I may have heard about you guys from listening to the Tom
Yeah,
Woods
we
show,
way back in the
probably
day, like
originally
the first
back in
podcast
the
we
day.
advertised on was Tom Woods. So yeah, it might be weird.
Yeah, and good move because it got you at least one list.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, yeah, I joined Tom's School of Life, haven't been on his email list for a long time, and then I would listen to the Peter Schiff show, when it was a internet radio show of some sort, and I don't know. And then Tom would guest host for Peter every once in a while, and Tom announced I don't know, it was when he was guest hosting for Peter or in his email that he was starting his new show, and that was gosh, who knows, 10, 12, 15 years ago. I don't know, can't remember,
At
but
least, yeah.
I've listened to every one of Tom's shows from the beginning, and it's improved quite a bit from the early days. And he had this school of life idea that I talked about earlier, which is he was pretty cryptic about it. But you sign up, and all right, you get a good price for signing up. So I did, and at that point, like I said, I was in between things. I didn't really understand where my life was going to be headed. And I wasn't actually that involved at the very beginning, uh, other than just attending the, biweekly webinars or whatever it
Mhm.
was. And there was not, a ton of community there. You had to go through a third party thing. It was like, it was similar to Facebook, but it wasn't Facebook. I couldn't figure that out. Anyway, one of the members, Jeremy Evans, he said, "All right, Tom, I got a tech stack I'm going to build for you, make this thing go." And then right around the same time, he started these accountability groups, and Jeremy became one of the facilitators there. Where and I got into one of his groups, and this is what I'm saying, where the people in the groups were like, "Well, what's your podcast going to be about?" I don't know. So, yeah. And I just kept going, and it was like, well, it was important for me just to keep doing it and keep writing and all this stuff. And by doing that, I got to know a lot of the members in the school, talking to
Mhm.
them, interviewing from my podcast. A lot of these people just like, I was pretty impressed, frankly, with a lot of these people, and they don't lack for ambition. I tell everybody they don't lack for ambition. A lot of us lack direction, maybe sometimes. We need like, all right, here, I got this great idea. Here we go. And
Mhm.
so about a year later, they one of the facilitators didn't work out for his schedule because I had like 5 or 6 calls over odd hours of the week. And um I uh they're like, "Oh, do you want to run one of the calls and see if like you're a fit or whatever?" I was like, "Oh yeah, sure, whatever." um I get this message like, "Congratulations." Like, "For what?" And "Oh, you're our new facilitator." I'm like, "Oh boy, well, how much time is this gonna take up?" I gotta ask my wife about it because the schedule, like, is, like, nights, mornings, midday, da. And, she's like, "Oh, yeah, go for it." And so I had 5 calls, scattered throughout the week, and these are just wonderful people. And every week we come in and you have all right, it's 90 they're 90-minute calls. It's like, "What'd you do last week that's related to,
Mhm.
where you wanna go, what you're moving toward?" I always say, like, we're working to make forward momentum, not looking to backslide. If a lot of these people are pretty ambitious, and they have ambitious projects. One fella, is trying to reinvent the business school model. So,
Really?
that's yeah,
That's pretty
going from
massive.
MBA.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's huge. It's massive. And it's like going from, like, the MBA, the management structure,
Mhm.
to, creating a business school based on entrepreneurship and the principles of Austrian economics or
Mm.
entrepreneurial economics. If people aren't, you got to do this whole education thing to talk about Austrian economics and what that is. And it's not from Austria, but, this, that, and the other. So
Right.
entrepreneurial economics. and he's doing great right now. Like it is such an ambitious project that he's toned it down a little bit to where like, all right, we're gonna do a course. And now this course is 13 or 14 modules. It's in a few universities. He's trying to get it expanded to uh, more, but he's written a couple books to support that. And one just released a couple weeks ago. His name's Hunter Hastings.
That
And
sounds familiar. Okay.
yeah, he's a super impressive guy. And so he's just one of many. And people have, they want to start a podcast. Okay. We had guys, I don't know how to podcast. So I said, I'll help you out. Start a podcast. And he's doing great. Adam Heyman Nature, you should check him out. And he does a show with or every week he does they call it a crossover with the economist Bob Murphy. And so they talk about, obviously libertarian leaning stuff. And Adam and I were doing a podcast for a while together, might start up again. But anyway, so all these people are really impressive. And so what we do is like, how'd you do last week? Okay. I didn't get this done, that done. Like, why? All right. Well, because of this, that, the other. All right. Then at the end of your turn, it's like, all right, I have an action item to do for the week. Some people want to do 3, 4, 5, 6 action items. Key is commit to one. That's what I tell them. And that works way better. But like I said, people are super ambitious and they have all sorts of things they want to do, and really remarkable people. And all, through Tom's, just listening to Tom Woods and knowing the stuff that Tom believes in. And so these are, really impressive people. I get to meet with, dozens of people every week. And we just go through.
I'm sure that rubs off on you. I mean, being able to, yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
And that is so, and I'm not a member of the School of Life, but I do like when Tom started, I remember reading about it, and when we were talking earlier about being libertarian leaning and the mess of the Libertarian Party, and I think it's so great to see people like Tom, and there's others too, and my show even has shifted this way too, where I still talk about some politics, but I would much rather my audience, people who aspire for freedom and liberty in their life, to focus on creating it themselves, taking ownership of their time. Like you're talking about, surround yourself with a community of like-minded people. People are going to support you in trying to build something to set yourself free, to set other people free, rather than going and trying to get a dog catcher elected so you can say we have an elected libertarian in Pennsylvania. Yeah. Let's actually try to influence the culture, influence business that way. Right. Because I remember when I first became a libertarian and I was reading all these books, and I would look around and be like, all right, I understand Austrian economics. Where are all the rich Austrian economists? Where are they?
The aforementioned Hunter Hastings would like to get a hold of all the rich Austrians to fund his business to entrepreneurship. Really, it's management. So where are all the rich Austrians? Okay, this is one of the things we work on. Are like, how do we find these people? How do we contact these people? Well, here's a strategy that kind of worked. All right, we'll work on another strategy. And I think it's just continuing to get out your message, whether it's via Substack, LinkedIn, podcast, writing books, whatever it might be. That's worked for Hunter, and he just keeps doing this thing. And but where are they? It's a question. Where are all the rich Austrians?
Yeah, well, I think we're going to have more and more as I'm hoping that
I agree.
That there's enough influencers out there like Tom, and Tom's not an influencer, but people who are putting a message out that is more of an opportunity to build something rather than an opportunity to try to elect a politician, which I think is mostly a waste of time. But we are about out of time here, Brian. So before I let you go, though, I do wanna, because I know you've
Yeah.
had a shift in your life. You talked about, going through COVID and losing your job because you wouldn't get vaccinated, and you have working towards this goal to become a syndicated
Never told
columnist.
anybody whether I did or didn't.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, I
Yeah, so
shouldn't have insinuated
that was my
it.
that was really my goal, I guess, for the summer. It's like I just want to all right, get my name out there and I've been Lou Rockwell has published a, at least a dozen of my articles over the last couple of years. That's been a real help. Lou's his platform's wonderful. And I've had a few of these articles from my Substack. I'm just some guy writing, and they get picked up. And I had
Mhm,
Zero Hedge picked up one. I'm like, well, how in the heck did Zero Hedge find out about me? And they're like, well, the one key to think about on if you ever get published on Zero Hedge, don't read the comments. But but anyway, like all these things, just keep on going and just keep on have a purpose, have priorities, and just keep on going. And you might have to reevaluate what these are every once in a while. I know, like for podcasting, I was like, all right, I want to podcast every day. I want to get my name out there every day. I can't do it. So I podcast on occasion now, and I'm fine with that. Like you said, you took off for Christmas, the week of Christmas. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to podcast whenever I can, and it's sporadic. It's a month here, two in a week here, another month later, and it's just
mhm,
what I can do, based on what I come across. But you talk about syndicated columnists, and I'm going full bore on that. But it's harder and harder to get your name in a or your column in a newspaper. They're
mhm,
few and fewer, and get them on a regular website. Well, how's that work? So I figure Substack is the way to go right now. I don't know if that's a long-term solution, but it's certainly a good short-term solution for me. And that's at o'learyreview.com. And then I'm also working on collections of columns and writing new columns to put in long form, like books and stuff that I can then sell. I just think the economics of Substack are such that you really need like tens of thousands of subscribers to free subscribers to then get enough people to want to pay for you, and then really are like my wife and I were talking about it the other night. It's like if I wanted to read or pay for every Substack writer that I want, like it'd be a budget buster. And
mhm,
so I fully understand that. So most my stuff is free on Substack, podcasts, columns. I paywall it after like 6 months or whatever, just because like that's one benefit of subscribing. But really, it's not. And so taking all right, here's what I do free, and then I'm working on taking stuff off platform, and I think that's I got a bunch of ideas uh, coming coming down the pike here in 2026 that I think should be good. And we talked about college football. Oh, we don't really talk about college football that much. We talked about around college football. And one of my projects that I started, gosh, maybe 20 years ago or something, was like a history of college football. And I had this thesis that it didn't really work. Like I was working through this thesis, didn't quite work. So I've readjusted it over the last really month. A lot of this, like what we talked about earlier, plays into it, and the power. And I'm not a fan at all, frankly, of the 12-team playoff. But it is what it is, right? We're
mhm,
in it, and I think it's destroyed a lot of college football, what made college football. But as I go back through the history, that is a constant point at every stop in the history of college football that it's been destroyed or whatever. And so I hope to have a really thorough history of that. And I don't know how long it's going to take, but I'm more committed than ever because now I have the path of where I want to take that, and the narrative I want to structure around that. And I don't really watch a ton of sports like I used to. I'll watch these college football playoffs, but it's one of those things that it's on. and I like football. I love football, and
Mhm.
I'll watch it, but it doesn't grab me, well, nearly as much as it did 5 years ago. I mean, I my friends and I would use I think 3 times, maybe 4. We rented an RV, went from Fiesta Bowl to Rose Bowl, sometimes called a
Really?
Holiday Bowl, and did it started and stopped in Las Vegas and made a whole week out of it, and we saw some of the best games you've ever seen in college
Yeah.
football just by being fans of the game. And the magic is still there in college football. It's just not the same as I think it once was. But who knows? Who knows what's going on? There's a lot of problems in this sport. But
Yeah, I mean, the history of college football, I think college football has it's ended almost. I mean,
yeah,
and sure, it's still the teams are still affiliated with the college. The players are being paid. I'm not against players being paid, but it's different. It's not the same thing. And college basketball too, and probably, I mean, it's probably I don't really watch college baseball, but I'm sure it's really across the board in any sort of major-ish sport at the college level, where it's just players have no loyalty. That's what made college football so great
I
is
agree.
that identification with the players because they maybe they sat in the same classrooms as I did or whatever. They went to the same whatever the same. You had the same common experience. Going to the same college and you shared that in common and pulling for the same team and alumni coming back and supporting their team. And now you have a player who will play for 5 different schools in a 5-year period. And it's like,
Sometimes
what?
7.
Yeah, what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll
But
see. I'm
yeah,
a rough year for my BC Eagles. Got your old coach Bill O'Brien. I think he's going to turn things around. But this year was rough.
yeah, he's a good coach. He doesn't need a whole lot of talent. He just needs a quarterback, some tight ends, and some offensive linemen, and he can make it work. He's
Yeah,
a
our portal is getting killed like Iowa State's is, thanks to
yeah,
your new coach, like, leaving. Oh,
yeah.
dear, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
That's the other thing. It's all, going down to the next level. So it all trickles down to,
Mhm.
these players just getting pulled from lower level school to lower level school, which is whatever. That's what it is. And like
Yeah.
I love
Yeah,
football too. So
this is a topic that, when I was doing my little research on this, I was saying maybe this becomes like this epic podcast about the history. I don't know what it's going to turn into, but I've got this project, and I started out as a book, but man, maybe it is just getting other people's opinions and doing a podcast and then writing the narrative about it later. I don't know. So we'll see. I think over the next year, so we'll kind of get this dialed in, and
yeah, why not both? Why not a
why not
book
both?
first,
Right.
maybe, then a
Right.
podcast? Yeah,
Yeah.
you could do all of it. Maybe the book kind of primes the pump and gets you access to some, bigger names to be able to interview. Yeah, that could
Yeah.
definitely work. Okay, well, we're about out of time here,
All
Brian.
right.
But before you go, once again, I want to give you a chance to point people towards your blog. If you want to point them towards
Yeah.
any socials or anywhere
Yeah.
else, too.
Just Substack is o'learyreview.com. That'll get you to my Substack. And like I said earlier, it has all my columns there, and um, podcasts and that stuff. And Brian D. O'Leary on Twitter, X, whatever you call it these days. And you can follow me there. And I'm not incredibly active. I check it a lot, but I'm not incredibly active. But that's where I'll post all the articles also on that side. So yeah, o'learyreview.com is where you want to go for to read and it's not all sports. It's sports, politics, like you said, sports, politics, culture, history. I like all that. Tying those things together is
Mhm.
really, I kind of found what my sweet spot is.
Yeah, I honestly, I think if you like my show, if you like this network Lions of Liberty, then you're probably going to like most of what Brian's doing over on his Substack. So definitely go check it out. But Brian,
Thanks.
thank you so much for coming on the show. Really enjoyed this.
My pleasure. Thanks, John.
Alrighty, bye now. Okay, that is a wrap for today's episode of Finding Freedom. Thank you all for listening. And thank you for subscribing. If you're either listening on an audio platform on your Magic Pocket listening device, also known as a cell phone, or if you're on YouTube or Rumble, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for the comments, the reviews. It is all appreciated and all helps with the algorithm so more people can see it. If you really like the content we are putting out here at Lions of Liberty, please, if I could speak, please consider supporting us on Patreon or Locals. Just go over there, search Lions of Liberty. You'll see a bunch of different ways that you can support us. We appreciate any and all of it. With that being said, thank you for listening. Happy New Year. And I will see you next week with another great episode. In the meantime, always remember to keep your head up and those fires of liberty burning.